Very pleased to be joined here at Blog of the Boys by the one and only, the incredible, the internationally
Wow.
famous. You know her, you love her. She had that super awesome touchboard thing at the Super Bowl with Sūmer Sports. It is Lindsay Rhodes. Lindsay, thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
What an intro. I don't know about the internationally part, but okay, hi.
When you do the touchboard thing,
Yeah.
was there like a class or like a 101? Because I feel that way about stuff like that all the time. That had to be, especially like you had a lot of guests, you know what I mean? Like you don't want, like Solomon Wilcots to show up and you're like, wait a second, it's not working.
I know. Let me go find that thing. There's a thing. It's here somewhere. I don't know where to find it. Let me call it. Yeah. No. For the most part, though it's kind of you to remember that I was the one doing that. I was like, ask a question. Sam, Sean, would you like to find it on the screen? Like I had people who knew how to work that touchboard. Yeah. So
Cool. I admittedly wasn't camped out at Radio Row as much as I usually am, so that's why my memory of that exact sequence of things is a little bit.
I like that your memory highlights me as the star. So
Okay.
let's just say your memory was onto something, and what I just said didn't happen.
That's true. Do you care more about the fact that Noah Lyle and Tyreek Hill canceled their race or Dak Prescott's legacy?
Oh my gosh. The Dak Prescott legacy conversation is my favorite. Like in June, and how many years into his career? Like, what are we actually doing? I say this with so much self-awareness of the fact that I have been involved in, there is video evidence of me leading conversations on television that resulted in a legacy question being discussed for a longer period of time than I would have liked. I think those conversations are so dumb. They're so dumb. And every single one of those conversations that I took part in on television, I can tell you, I did so kicking and screaming. I hate them. I think they're so stupid. I think even the ones that are actually relevant, I think are so stupid. Like there was a period of time when the Patriots were in the Super Bowl every year, right?
Sure.
Every year we had to have the conversation. What does this one do to Bill Belichick's legacy? I was like, we're fucking done. Like his legacy's done.
Yeah.
Like it's all gravy. Like we established this 5 years ago. And then for Tom Brady, it was like, 5 years after we decided he was the GOAT, we were still like, what does this one do? I don't know.
It's difficult. I didn't mean to start with the dumb stuff. You at Sūmer, you chronicle so many things intellectually and objectively, and I wanted to start there. But when I sent you some props, you brought up the Dak legacy thing. We're recording this on Tuesday, and you said this on Monday, which was the day that came out. And I was naturally curious, given your history in television. We talked about the NFL Top 100 last time we spoke, which was also right around when the SB Nation podcast universe died. Some people blamed you. I did not. So, but
right.
that was a fun coincidence. But
you landed on your feet.
The YouTube channel survived. It's like the cockroach, that survived the nuclear bomb or whatever.
You're not going anywhere.
That's what we're doing here. That being said, I think that we have reached a place with the stupid stuff where nobody enjoys that. Like it did hurt people for a while. You know what I mean? Like there were people who fell for it and who enjoyed it. Like I hand up, and I'm not proud of this, but like the day that the Broncos beat the Steelers in the wild card round and Tebow had the moment, like I very vividly remember like thinking, I can't wait to hear what Skip Bayless says tomorrow. Like I legitimately felt that way on some level.
That is an admission.
I mean, full honesty, you know what I mean? And so, but that was a long time ago. And we reserve the right to change. We reserve the right to learn. And, I was, younger and dumber and, more naive or whatever, less experienced. And so that being said, I don't think that kind of net brings in as many fish the way it used to. And so like, I don't think like who legitimately was like, yeah, let's talk about Dak's legacy when that went out.
I mean, I agree. But then I also, so the way that television works on that scale is that they're trying to reach the most people possible, which is like we're in such an interesting inflection point in terms of media because now there's so many other places where you can go get media. And so there's all these like niche silos of conversations that are happening and that I think are the counter programming to that. But they haven't moved away from that approach. Like the broad television is as broad as it has ever been. They're like doubling down. They're like more Stephen A. Smith, all the platform. He's on all the shows. So they're, so I think there is some evidence out there that must do numbers or they wouldn't continue to do that. They would go, hey, there's some there's some signal over here in the fact that these smaller shows that are a little bit like more in the things that matter, they're telling the stories of the things that matter. Like this is working a little bit. They're not chasing that. So I kind of wonder if what you're saying is true, or if it's just that you have become more settled into not being interested in that. Like well, this is going to feel like after you said that, like I'm like bragging or something. Like I've never been into that. I've never been that audience. And I've always been really clear, like, I don't care. Like if this isn't making me smarter in some way, or like if it's not helping me, like there needs to be value added. So am I getting information that's making me a better fantasy player? It's going to give me an edge in that way? Or can I go make a bet that is now, or can I go into a group of people at a party and now I know things that I didn't know before, and now I'm a more interesting fan person? Or like when I think of all the different boxes that could be checked about why I would consume information and why I think a lot of people do, none of them are checked in conversations like that. So my guess is a lot of people just don't need those checked, and they just want to turn their brain off and sit and just let it wash over them.
That's really well said. I think the part about like, wanting to be able to have better small talk, to dilute everything you said down to one point, is apt. And that's where I've sort of ultimately landed. These weren't your words, but like, how can I impress this person? Like, what unique thing can I know? That's why I look at the trivia on stuff on IMDb after I watch it. You know what I mean? So that I can tell you, like, when they were shooting Wicked, they actually did this or whatever. That's kind of my lane at this point in time. Again, I'm not proud of the fact that I felt that way, but to your point, I love golf, and even like last week was the U.S. Open, and there's a golf channel. And despite that, and the golf channel isn't anywhere near like Stephen A or whatever, but even then I'm still in my silos, like my silos of golf content, because those are way more specific to things I care about. They talk about things more uniquely and more in depth, and give me, in that case, information that I can use for the sake of the tournament and knowing who's going to play well or whatever. You just don't get that on the mainstream. So it is what.
If to further that point, and then even circle back to the sticky stat series that we have been doing at Sūmer, we've just finished it up today, where we did a series of podcasts where we dove into different position groups and said, like, what stats actually matter? Because again, to double down on the phrase of inflection point, I think that's kind of where we are in general with sports right now.
Passing yards and wins. Those are the only ones.
Well, we're at a point where there's so many advanced stats that I think it can be overwhelming for someone to go like, which ones matter, which ones don't matter, which whatever. But at the very least, what I think I'm finding is that there's two buckets of people. There are people that still operate with the basic box score counting stats that we've always operated on, and they think that that makes the argument that they're making. And this came up a lot for me last year with regards to Aaron Rodgers. So people, in the Jets camp that were like, yeah, but he threw for the 8th most passing yards this year. And I was like, did you see how he did that? Like there's so many ways that we could break those numbers down into numbers that actually tell the story of how he played. And just the basic math is pass attempts, right? So we have the second most pass attempts. And then let's go look at the yards per attempt. Well, yards per attempt, he ranked like, I'm just guessing now, I don't have the number off the top of my head, like 31st in the NFL. It's something like that. So anyway, but my point is ESPN, I just looked today because I was looking for a stat. And on individual defensive stats, if you want to know how good a player is, you're going to find tackles, you're going to find sacks, you're going to find tackles for loss, you're going to find interceptions, you're going to find forced fumbles. Like it's literally all counting stats. There's no rates. There's no, and like we
averages even.
I mean, it's wild to me that this is what ESPN is serving people statistically. Like that doesn't tell you anything. And what's funny is that because that's not where I'm going for my stats, right? I forget that that's what a lot of people are being served. And so sometimes like we just had this conversation on our podcast, and I kind of forget sometimes that some of the things that I feel like are obvious are not obvious to everybody. And I kind of need to dial it back and start at the beginning and then tell them why the things that we have long thought were obvious are not. And then tell them a different way of looking at this is this. Because I never want to be one of those like people that talks over your head. You know what I mean? But like, this is my silo. My silo is different. It doesn't involve counting stats anymore in a time when we have rates for everything. So like, for instance, for people on the line, the stickiest stat that we've found is pressure rate. It's not sack rate. It's certainly not total anything. It's I am on the field this many times. I'm asked to do this many times. How successfully do I do it within that number?
Right.
So, and we've found that pressures are more sticky than sacks. And I think if you just like even think about it, it feels pretty obvious as to why that is, because the pressure is the process.
And
the
they happen more often.
Result.
Then like a sack is I wouldn't say rare, but I mean there's what 10 sacks in a given game if you like in a really large way, like versus how many pressures in a given game on both sides of the ball.
And the pressure is the process that leads to the sack. So if you're consistently doing that, regardless of who you're butting up against, or if the quarterback can get the ball out faster, if the quarterback can leave the pocket. This also, the next layer to this conversation is the fact that sacks and pressures and a lot of those stats are quarterback stats.
Right.
And a lot of people for a long time they think it's an offensive line stat. So, the Bears, for instance, they allowed 68 sacks last year. It was the most in the NFL. Their O-line sucks. Well, if you go through it and you count out how many of those sacks were actually assigned from a blame standpoint to offensive linemen, you'll find 37. 37, just over half. So almost half of their sacks were because someone else messed up. My guess is that a lot of those are on Caleb because he holds on the ball too long and doesn't get rid of it. Or like a running back maybe missed his protection, whatever. There's other things. Now, by the way, 37 sacks allowed by the offensive lineman. Only the offensive line is still high for an offensive line. So I'm not saying
it's just not as high as the other number would lead you to indicate or have the assumption based off of. Right.
And like the Texans, for instance, who allowed fewer sacks than them, the percentage of their sacks that were allowed that were credited to the offensive lines, like in the 70% range. So like I could make an argument that even though they allowed fewer sacks, that the Texans offensive line was actually worse, right? Anyway, there's just so many different numbers that you can look at now that make those types of stats like my brain wants. I'm just like, oh my God, we're having that conversation. Okay, let me dial it back and start at the beginning here.
It is funny to think about 5 years ago. We were like, this Eagles offensive line really sucks because Carson Wentz has taken all these sacks. And then immediately Jalen Hurts shows up and it's like, oh, wait a minute, this offensive line is good again. So like these phenomenons can happen. And people can still just like tabulate and be like, I don't know, man. Did you see how many sacks that they gave up? Like they suck. It's a really interesting thing. So the like, I don't know, segue, whatever, to Tyler Booker. And this was the first tweet you had this offseason that caught my eye relative to the Cowboys. And Lizzie, we'll link to Lindsay's, if you want to call it X, fine. I really don't care.
I hate that. I know it's Twitter forever.
I feel really stupid when I do it. Like insane. Like I'm wearing like a mascot costume, stupid. Like not to disrespect that profession, but I feel very silly.
Like you're gonna be like, and also in the Gulf of America, like in other news, like of course, no, you don't just get to like rename things randomly. I feel that way about Staples Center.
Obviously.
I feel that way about Staples Center. I live in Los Angeles and I will still like, I mean, I'm around the Lakers less. I'm covering the Lakers less. There's no need for me to say the name of their venue.
Right.
But like I will call it Staples Center until I die. Like
Heinz
that's
Field.
Just what it is. Totally.
Yeah, like who's calling it what is it, Acrisure or
you paid some money, so now I need to learn a new thing?
I don't know what is sponsoring Arrowhead, but it's Arrowhead. Like it's not even a sponsor. Like they're very fortunate that is sticking. But Tyler Booker, who isn't sponsored as far as I know, was referred to as a brick wall by a lot of people, but also by Sūmer Sports in their tweet, y'all's tweet. You called him a mauler. Now this is about Tyler Booker, but your tweet said they can get a complimentary. You said, I love it, Mauler. They can get a complimentary wide receiver later. And you threw out a name. Do you remember who you threw out in terms of who you thought Dallas would come back around later in the draft to get a wide receiver? We obviously know they didn't, but who did you think?
Who did I say? I was saying Emeka Egbuka for everybody, but I don't think I would have said them for the Cowboys. Did I?
No, you said you thought it would be he wound up close. I guess that's your clue. In a geographical sense, he wound up close.
Why am I blanking? The one that went to the Texans?
It was
Higgins.
Yeah. Yep. So, but they didn't. So on Tyler Booker.
Yeah.
Mauler. Awesome. Etc. Pressure rate. 0 sacks allowed forever. Whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Love it. I think I think so. I talked to a lot of people during the build up to the draft who loved him, right? And offensive line is tricky always, trying to figure out who will transition from college to the NFL. Not only because you're trying to figure out, the competition level and which stats matter and how to
Right.
evaluate one person's stats versus another person's stats because the environments are so different. No line is so environment driven. But also who's actually a guard, who's actually a
Right.
tackle, all this stuff. So for him, I loved the fact that his position was set. Like we weren't questioning that. Like we know exactly what he is. We know who he is. We know he is a high end of his position. Slot that in and then with a degree of confidence say like, I kind of know what he's going to be,
Right.
And so I like that. It felt Daniel Jeremiah in the build up to the draft called him one of the safest players in the draft. And I kind of think that that's what the Cowboys needed. The Cowboys need some stability. They need some safety. They need some, you and I have talked a few times in the past, like they do some wild swing stuff. They do some stuff that just feels like we're going to make a splash so that you'll talk about us on First Take. Maybe that's a priority for Jerry Jones. I don't know. I kind of think it is. So at this point, I felt like that's actually just a smart building block to have on your team. And I also think in this year's wide receiver class, and I know that some people might disagree with me, and certainly some of the teams did. I don't know that. So, like after Tet's gone, I don't know that the wide receivers that we're going to go in that range are like absolutely can't miss slam
Right.
dunk, like high end wide receivers. And so I like what they ended up doing with Pickens much better than taking a wide receiver there. Running back felt very high, even if there is a running back. Like I was like, as a running back, the answer for the Dallas Cowboys, you just need to like bring in a position of very little value that like that
Again.
that
Yeah.
shows no there's like no historical data that says like a running back changes the offense. Like you plug that in, which I know some people will argue the Cowboys have now made the moves. And so they are the team. And actually I would point to the running back being like the whole of the offense now. So maybe that would have worked. I just like the Tyler Booker pick. But Brian Baldinger, who I think we all kind of can trust his O-line evaluation. I shot him a text at one point and was like, who is your favorite? Who would you bang the table for? Like, who's your guy? And he's like, Tyler Booker is my absolute favorite. I love it. I wouldn't be surprised if he was the first offensive lineman that went off the board.
I mean, all of that makes sense, especially Brian Schottenheimer was asked his final question of the pre-draft press conference. I loved it. Was if he felt like this is getting away from objectivity and stats and just like feelings now, but if he felt like this pick had to be symbolic or whatever, because it was his first as the team's head coach, and he's not authoring these picks or whatever, however you view the relationship and Jerry and blah blah blah, but it does feel like that, right? It feels like, okay, like this is the very first swing of my golf club. Like I cannot overpower this. I cannot do anything. I'm just trying to put the ball in play. And that's really smart. On Tyler, again, also not an objective question, which I can't believe I have a lot of all of a sudden with you here, because I really value in your career, you have been a question asker, and you have been a like, well, why? Like, this doesn't make sense. And then always trying to find the root of the reason and an objective, measurable reason for something, not just because somebody said so. But what stock, if any, do you put into he's from Alabama, he's an IMG Academy guy? Like this, there's something.
No, absolutely.
Not quantifiable, but there's something to like, that again, I don't mean to say it matters a lot, but like, or that it matters a little, but it clearly is a discussion point, I guess, is where I'm going.
Yep. I think that if we wanted to, like, if I put this in front of data people, they would say that there's signal in that. There's signal in people co-signing something, right? Like that consistently people have looked at this person and they have said, yes. Yeah. And I think that that's actually an interesting point, kind of a tangential point to that, of where we're going with the college to NFL evaluation process. One of the things that we've noticed with like the Rams, for instance, is that they've established a pattern of taking defensive linemen in particular who have transferred up in college. And so if you, let's say with now the transfer portal being what it is, let's say you start at, school A, you didn't get a ton of offers out of high school. You go here, you outperform this. Colleges that are looking for someone to plug in go, that's the guy. So he goes here. And then he outperforms this and maybe transfers up even again. Okay. So now by the time you're actually in the draft process, we have evaluation data that's different than we used to have.
Right.
Like,
Great
think about
point.
quarterbacks, for instance. Like, it used to be, okay, Matt Leinert's at USC. The team is very good. He plays his whole career. We have no idea how much credit he should be allocated for what they did, or how
Right.
much he benefited from having a great coaching staff or great offensive line or wide receiver, anything. You just don't know. You just know that he did well there. So now that these guys are changing environments and also being identified by other people, now a lot of people are kind of co-signing this person's rise and the fact that they continue to outperform. Like, now, new set of expectations. I have outperformed this.
Right.
There's signal in that. And you're learning even the intangible stuff that actually is important. You're learning new languages, you're learning new schemes, and you're
Right.
showing that you can do that. And you're clearly hitting the ground running, because you don't have a small, like, you have to play well that year.
Right.
So that you
That's
can
a great
transfer up
point.
again. So now we have identifiable things that we can look for in college that are maybe signal to say, hey, go look at this. It's not the whole story. You go look at the player, you go look at the tape, you look at all of that stuff. But there are some ways that we can kind of figure out who we should start with, maybe.
Yeah, that's a really great way to put it. Like, I love the term signal. Like, it does alert your eyes, to why this person keeps succeeding, why this person keeps thriving, why people keep offering, why he keeps getting more, whatever the case may be. So Tyler Booker's cool. Awesome. Great. George Pickens, cards on the table. And I keep saying this to our audience. I was against it. And I say that just from an accountability standpoint. Super pumped about it. I'm on board. I maintain, and I've said this and people are annoyed about it by now, extend him now. Like, that's a whole different conversation, but like, why wait? I mean, the plan is for him to be awesome. And you just gave up a 3rd round pick for him. So whatever. And we know their history with extending players. That being said, you said that you prefer this obviously to Jaden Higgins or they didn't go Jaden Higgins in the 2nd round. They went Donovan Ezuraku. This felt, it seemed like they were going to go Ted McMillan if he was there. He wasn't. And they doubled down, maybe paid a little bit of a premium because circumstances, whatever. But in my estimation, this is the best pass catching duo they've had since 2014-ish, prime Des Bryant, prime-ish Jason Witten, whatever. CD has never, not to go tabulation on you, but CD has never played with a receiver who had 800 yards opposite of him since Amari Cooper.
And that's so massively important.
Right.
It's so important. I mean, there's wide receiver is one, edge, offensive line. Like, there are certain positions where you are only as good as the number 2 and how good they are, right? And wide receiver is obviously one of those. Like, if you are a strong number 1 wide receiver and then the number 2 is way off the map, you're going to get double teamed. The defensive, like, it's so much easier to defend that, right? So now if you put somebody like George Pickens on the field, and I'll raise my hand and say, I'm not 100% sold or clear on who he is or where he ranks. Like, I'm not, like, if this was a fantasy draft, I don't know that in general, unless he falls to a certain range, like, he's a guy that I want to take at value, but I'm not reaching for because of the inconsistent nature of his game in the past. So I've never really looked at him and thought of him as a strong one. I think he's like a lower end one for a number of different reasons, though he has all the athletic ability in the world.
Of course, yeah.
There's also signal in the fact that Pittsburgh is like, bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
Yeah.
Couldn't wait to get rid of him, right?
And that
like,
nobody jumped on the trade before the draft as well.
Because there's a lot more going on there, I think, behind the scenes with regards to like how he needs to be managed. And I don't know the details, but I'm just saying, like, observationally, that appears to be true. So, but just on the field, there is also inconsistency, like effort, sometimes it's full out, sometimes it's not. Sometimes that shows up in all of the stats, but clearly he's talented. And now if we're making him a 2, or if we even want to call it a 1A, 1B, I think it's a 2. I think it's a high 2. Similar to T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. I think you could make the argument that that's a 1A, 1B, but I mean, Jamar Chase is Jamar Chase. Like, there's a clear hierarchy in that wide receiver room even. And so I think that this is similar, but I think that that's wonderful, right? Like, if you're even drawing any kinds of comparisons, now we're slotting him in as a 2, as the second option, that's a plus, and if you have CD somewhere over here being all of the wonderful things CD is, it gives you a little bit more space to have whatever flaws you have as George Pickens, to a degree. So so I really like the combination. I think that this was the perfect team to pull him in, because I think you need a strong number 2 so that CD can look like CD, so that CD's just like, you just need to find ways to give him space.
It's absurd that it's taken this long in the CD's career, this long in the Dak's career, right? For these
There's a lot of absurd that's happened, though, right? So
so I mean, all George Pickens love and accolade and statistical assessment matters, but to that point, so I mentioned I find you to be a very logical person. You don't ever in my experience speak off of assumptions or off of generalities. And so you mentioned something a little while ago. You said that you on some level believe the Cowboys are, they behave the way they do because they want to be the headline on First Take. I can't refute that, to be very clear. And I don't have an interest in refuting that. I'm not like, my feelings aren't hurt that you feel this way. That being said, the CD deal, the Dak deal, the Micah situation at the moment, at the time we're speaking, I can't simply put it under the umbrella of they want to lead in headlines, because that doesn't logically answer everything. Now, I don't think that they're this dumb. I don't think anyone would be this dumb. I don't think anyone could deny the mountain, the universe of evidence that exists against them relative to this specific part of roster construction. But that being said, and maybe the answer is that illogical. Maybe I'm trying to make logic out of a situation that's void of it. But if you have to sweep everything under one rug for how they behave, what is it that they have geniusly devoted $5 million of salary cap space every year to attention, and they're willing to pay that tax on Micah or Dak or whoever so that they stay, because the idea that they need this deal to lead, like the Dak legacy led get up, not the Micah situation, so that they don't need these contract situations to perpetuate their fame. They already have that, in and of itself.
Well, so let me answer your question with a question, and I'm sorry for doing this. What are the logical things that you can latch onto as to even possibly being the reason outside of that? Because I agree with you. That's not illogical. Like, that's certainly not where I started. Right. Like, it's where I landed. Like, because there's no business argument for it.
Right.
We know objectively they only get more expensive. And by the way, he's not pausing to pay a traditional linebacker or a safety or a running back, although he did with Zeke. But
he didn't pause. He was forced into that. Zeke held out to the point. You know what I mean? Like,
and in retrospect, that's the one he should have maybe doubled down on, although he waited so long that he needed him. Like, of course you're going to pay him. We're into the season. Like, who else is running the ball for you? So, but if you did it earlier and you decided, I don't want to pay this, then make a move. Like, set yourself up to not pay it. There are no moves that suggest we're not going to do this. Like, there's no actual bluff happening. That's
a great way to put it. So what I said last year, and we spoke about this about a year ago, I would have killed them for letting Dak walk. And I keep saying this, but I would have. But if they had come up in their mind with pick whatever day you want and said what I keep saying is June 1st. I recognize that's an actual relevant date. But if we don't have a deal by June 1st, we live with it. We live with the consequence and whatever. Fine. Again, I would have disagreed with that decision, but at least you made a non-emotional decision and you stuck with it and you moved on like adults, right? But by waiting until the day the season began, quite literally, you did it quite literally in the most inefficient way possible. Like there was not a more inefficient way to do this. And so that's my point. So I mentioned you have, I had some of your tweets. You tweeted on the day, this was the day the season began. And the moment after Dak got his deal, they were playing in Cleveland, whatever. Bigger fish to fry right now. Season was beginning, a lot going on, obviously. And you said, but the Cowboys paying Dak $60 million a year now is so them. If they had assigned him in the spring, they could have probably come in under Burrow at 55, and they obviously came in at 60. As it is, they let Jordan Love go first, driving the price up. You didn't mention Tua Tagovailoa or Jared Goff. They got deals as well. He was always getting paid. Whole thing was cray. cray, not crazy. I don't know how part of your lexicon that is. But that, and people came
The
back
signal there is that I have young children.
right. People always came in, Lindsay, and said, well, he was always getting more than Tua, always getting more than Jordan Love, always getting more than Jared Goff. I agree with that. So then why not do it early? Like it's not even that there isn't business sense. There isn't any sense. My biggest criticism of them was that they did not have one North Star, whether that was to play it out a certain way, to pay him whatever. And so when you have different levels of energy in different cookie jars, like you don't have any cookies, you know what I mean?
Right. Well, and like with Micah now, like why? It's the same conversation. So maybe you could go, okay, Miles got paid. Maybe Miles, you could make the argument we're not coming in over Miles, right? Like, just I'm thinking logically, that's probably unlikely because usually it's whoever goes next gets paid more. But
Right.
like, if you wanted to set a barometer, you could make an argument. He's done more. Like, like that's a guy who you could go, okay, we're gonna come in just under him. But like, Trey Hendrickson hasn't, but like, let's say Trey got a deal. Like you could
why chance it? Why chance that that the Bengals could blink or the Steelers could with what?
Trey is old. And like, so let's say he, for whatever reason, tops this. Now you're screwed.
Right.
Because you got to go over Trey. So now whatever space you have had to say, okay, we could make the argument to come in under Miles. Miles is done. What are you waiting for? You're just going to let someone else move to the top. And then your argument goes away because you got to go over Trey. So like the whole thing
So again, I like putting things in these terms. You're a lawyer in a court of law and you have to defend this. They're your client. You have to defend. You're like when TikTok got into Suits like a year and a half ago, even though the real ones watched it
was
10
weird,
years
right?
Yeah, I mean, I watched it when it first came out, and it was awesome. Like, I loved it then, and so when it was like a popular thing, and then we got get your content off, but I do not need a podcast for every show that ever existed to tell me.
Like a rewatch.
I don't need this. Again, I have zero issue with people grinding, but I just don't need it. Whatever.
You're
anyway,
not the audience.
Not my thing.
They'll watch First Take and also the Suits rewatch.
Right. I don't need the Office Ladies or the Scrubs one. Like, the shows were great.
Good for them cashing in again.
Yeah, by all means. I mean, again,
you guys should I do a podcast rewatching some of the old Total Access?
That
would actually be funny. Be like, remember when that guy was good? What happened to that guy? Like the stuff that would come up, that you'd be like, that was a stupid conversation.
You brought up Zach Martin, and recently I thought of I don't know if you knew his brother-in-law was Tyler Eifert. I hadn't thought about Tyler Eifert in a long time.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, his wife his wife is Tyler's sister. Yeah, so they both Notre Dame guys, whatever. Anyway, that being said, you have to defend this pattern. What I mean, you're on retainer. Like, what's the best you got?
Well, I'm okay on the spot.
It's impossible. I don't think it's possible. But again, you're a pretty logical thinker, so I thought if anyone could somewhat convince us, it might be you.
Yeah, I don't think I can take that side just because I so consistently have tried to give them the benefit of the doubt and have been unable to come up with what that is and what it looks like. Like, just simply because in a business sense, it's so objective. Like if you're trying to create, but also if you're trying to create a culture, this is counterproductive. I mean, you could say like, hey, you're going to have to earn it here. Right. But also the people who have earned it are not getting rewarded. They're having to
the ones who earned it the most are
plead for their scraps of like, and then maybe being alienated in the process. Like, you're going to spend a year telling me I suck? Like, what are you talking about? Why? So I turned this job down.
If I can be your co-counsel for a moment, have you, you mentioned you have young children. I imagine you have Disney Plus. Have you either through that subscription or of your own accord seen the third Mighty Ducks movie?
No.
I don't know if you're familiar with the franchise, and obviously it's a hockey team. In the third movie, I've equated things to this before, but they go to like a prep school and they all have scholarships. But Emilio Estevez is no longer their coach, And the main
Oh,
duck
God.
has a big issue with this. Like he's like Boy Meets World, struggling with change. Like he doesn't like it, whatever. And so they're butting heads with the coach, and they schedule on their own a match against the varsity. And they at like 6 a.m. Never mind that these like 15-year-olds get up and go play hockey at 6 a.m. whatever. But they go and the Ducks get their ass kicked. Like they try the flying V, and like the other team literally just like runs it over. Like it's embarrassing. And so their actual coach shows up and like cusses them out, whatever. And they're just, like the kind of cussing that like makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. And he tells them your little duck tricks won't work here, which is a valuable lesson, obviously, as you grow and mature in life. And I like these like tricks seem to just be like, oh, well, we made Emmett hold out and it worked. And, we went, the distance with Ken Norton Jr. and whatever. It's like, no, like this, like, it's just a commitment to the way they've always done things because reasons, you know what I mean? I don't think to answer my own question. And,
Are you making a legal argument for the Cowboys in this argument against the Cowboys?
My logical argument for like if they hold any logic, it's that they're just Sinatra styling it. Like this is their way, and that's the best defense I have for what they are doing is that they call all the shots. They're in charge. They're the ones with the keys to the castle, and so this is the way they like to do it. As stupid as it is, because who supports this? Like you can't support it, as we've documented.
I still think, even though it makes no sense whatsoever to any of us that want this to make sense, I think that the thing that makes the most sense here is Jerry Jones thinking there is no bad press. And I think you could make an argument that these do actually get them on all of the front pages of, well, metaphorical front pages of like First Take and whatever. Like the fact that they offer up this easy content
right
to discuss. It's so easy. It's so, should they or shouldn't they? What are they doing? Outrage, cowboy. The number of like earned media, like the dollars. If you're thinking I'm going to go buy a commercial, how much would a commercial in the middle of Sports Center cost? So if they think of like, we just took 5 minutes of airtime and they were talking about the Cowboys, how valuable is that? Okay, I'm landing in my spot now. Now I'm coming up with my legal. Okay. But like there actually is a tangible number you could put to that.
It's the cap space that is acquired or lost on the contract relative to Micah or Dak. Again, it's like, oh, every year we're signing cap space or attention to an $8 million contract, whatever the loss is on your big deals.
But also they could make the argument that like that cap's going up anyway. We're making that money back.
We're
like,
telling
it's not
you
like
to use that logic on the players. Like that's the crazy thing.
But so I'll pay him whatever.
Right.
And I'm fine with being called an idiot because you're going to call me an idiot on the biggest platforms over and over and over again. And the number of times that you're going to talk about my team instead of the Ravens or the Rams or these other teams that are actually a little bit more legitimate in the way that they're doing business, but are under discussed. There is some value to that. And as much as I think people hate the America's team and like, they're talking, I think that there's some downside to it in terms of like goodwill. I think people hate the Cowboys that are not Cowboys fans because they're shoved down their throat, like, and have been for decades. You could make the argument that's Jerry, that Jerry positioned them to be the team that is being shoved down everyone's throat. And so the fact that as many people hate them and are as angry about all of this is actually a win for Jerry. I did it.
Yeah, you did, which was great. I mean, like it's a losing case, but at least, you can walk out and feel like, well, that law school education was worth it. You know what I mean? Like I was able to, consciously and coherently make an argument
without a law school education. So.
That's right. Okay. So it's funny that you kind of ended with Jerry and being like all knowing, all powerful, like the great Oz back to Wicked. But I told you before we started that I was looking through your tweets for some fun stats relative to different things. But I found one that I think it's just kind of it's like a time capsule, like it's representative of the moment in time. This was from October 13th, 2011. If any idea. Well, I was searching like buzzwords like Dallas and Jerry and whatever. And so this had a lot of those. But I was also searching Romo. So this came up. I don't think it's anything like what you think. So I have it here for you. And the reason I think this is representative of time, this is in a 140 character limit time. That's what I found funny about this. There is so much.
Number 2, check in on.
This is how people spoke in 2011 on the internet. But you mentioned
gross
that Jerry had on his birthday the power to control the weather. Which is also another point of discussion, the sun and the glare. And just
it was his 69th birthday?
Apparently, according to your tweet.
Okay.
So I just found that funny. I think, we don't look back at life all too often.
Do you know what? Because I do that sometimes too, where I look for search terms. Normally, I'm not looking for like something from 2011. I'm looking for something 3 months ago. And I was looking under
Dak and Romo.
I'm not saying you did a weird thing. I'm saying this comes up. And so I know what you're talking about because I'll be looking for, I'm like, I know I talked about such and such, but like, where was that? Where was the number that went along with that? And half the time I can't find it. But what does come up, to your point about Twitter just being weird back in the day and like dated, is the number of times that we used to retweet, but we would write RT before.
You had to do that.
Like it wasn't actually, we didn't did they not have a retweet button then? We would just like, why did we do that?
It was the only way that you could apply commentary to like what we know now to be the quote tweet function.
Okay.
You couldn't do that. Your choices were to either retweet it or nothing. So like if I recall correctly, you would actually, I'm assuming you did this, you would like copy the entire text and then like write your thought and then paste the RT, everything. But that was the only way to add your little snippet to the conversation.
By the way, I love that. I don't know what this says about me, that it's like you're explaining something that I have never seen or lived.
Even though you literally did it. Yeah,
absolutely. I'm hearing this for the first time. I am absolutely learning how I used to tweet in real time. I have no memory of this.
I mean, I'm assuming that's the case because that's how, I and like the whole world did it. So unless you had a secret way, that's, that's up to you.
I'm sure that's it.
But yeah, he had the power to that was people act every year. The sun thing comes up and it's like, dude, we've been talking about this for a long time. I don't think that's what you were talking about in this tweet, but it is you thought Jerry had the power to control the weather. Lo and behold.
I'm going to check in, letter N.
That was what stood out to me.
It
felt very I love in The Departed when he texts like in his pocket, I'm talking about, like, and because he can use the T9 like without seeing it. It felt like that to me. So, good for you, Lindsay.
This is a fun trip down memory lane.
Lindsay with like the N is clearly special. To you holds a special value. Sūmer Sports. You guys have anything special coming out when training camp comes up? Like what's the Sticky Stats series is over, but what else is on the docket?
We do. We have a really cool tool that we're working on that is called SumerBrain. So it is, and stick with me through this if anybody hates some of the words that are about to come out of my mouth. So it is an AI-driven search engine.
Oh, strong start.
I know.
Okay.
I know. So as somebody who is literally scared of AI, like in every way, and have mostly stayed away from it, here's why I think that this is actually a rad tool. Because the number of times that you go try, we talked about the number of advanced stats that are out there right now, right? Like there's every stat under the sun and they're all on different sites. And so you have to like sign up for a subscription over here in order to get this, but they don't have the other stat that I like. So now I have to go sign up for something over here. So SumerBrain will have all of these advanced stats with the ability to filter through them. And then also a lot of other things. And so the time that you spend researching things, and by the way, people who are not content creators or whatever, you're not even spending time researching things. Like there's stuff that you can ask that you can find out. You can ask fantasy questions. We're putting fantasy projections into it. So you could ask it a start sit question and it will filter injury status, and in the past, when this player's been on the injury report, how has that actually affected their production?
Wow.
Like by a percentage point,
That's super
right?
valuable.
Yes. So we're putting really, really advanced data into it so that you can ask it basic questions and it will give you answers that are not basic, that will point you in the direction of some of this information where you don't have to search all over on a bunch of different sites looking for this information. And some of it will be tangible answers to things that we assign vague weather. Oh, they're playing in the snow. And so we all know that they're going to pass less, so should I start Josh Allen in fantasy? Or that's a bad example because he's going to run the ball anyway, but you know what I'm saying? Like Joe Burrow, he's in the snow. They're not going to throw. So should I start this other guy over him? Well, now ideally we will have tangible numbers that you can assign to in snow games. Here's how much the production for this position typically, how it's affected.
The snow tax.
And also how much it affects Joe specifically, so that you have a pretty good idea of assigning tangible assessments to things that we haven't had the ability to do. So we're training it to speak football right now, and it will be out later this summer.
So ahead of the season, that's what matters the most. You know what I mean?
Well, in time for all of your fantasy drafts, it'll be around like training campish.
This is the oasis that we have to get through to that point. But once we do, it's just an onslaught. So that is going to be super cool. You pick Joe, Snow Joe. Like that's like a great, you should have little like emojis. Like when you search that, there's like, like the little snowman or whatever that accompanies him. So
to go with his cool, like, because he kind of has to have the cool emoji, right?
He has that very popular video of him like throwing the pass and like doing the twirl in the snow. You know what I'm talking about?
I don't.
It's a very iconic thing. Apparently
was it posted on Twitter with an RT in front of it, or
I can't verify. I haven't searched that today, but I will. But it was he like throws a pass and then does kind of like a pirouette. He just kind of spins and the video is in slow motion, so he's turning while the ball is sailing. It looks cool, but apparently like high school kids do it every week, so whatever. Lindsay, you are the very best. Thank you. And I'm sorry that the Cowboys broke your brain for a little while, but you landed on your feet. That's what matters.
Oh, they're going to continue to break me. There's no for a little while. Okay. Like it is in a constant state of breaking. But
well, we appreciate your time.
Thank you.